Hey, it's Neil here from Email Splat, and I got a question about Ontraport and custom objects from Alan, and he asked me about bridge objects and what they are and why you would consider using one. And so I'm going to run through some of my thoughts and strategy when I'm planning out custom objects and why I use bridge objects and when I do, when I don't, because with every pro comes a con, right? So we want to make sure that we're not making things more complicated than they need to be, or making things that just aren't going to work for our purpose, our business uses. So just kind of the pros of custom objects in general. In Ontraport, you get contact objects, right? And that's all you have. And you can turn on custom objects and create other objects, like in this case, with Alan's talking about events. So we could have events, which would have their own automations and things running on them versus contacts. And there's really three different ways we could set up an events object in relationship to contacts. And that is, we could have a many to many relationship between contacts and events. I very rarely use a many-to-many relationship because it's limited on the automation side of Ontraport. So if you want to manually do things, many-to-many is great if you're just looking for for historical, for kind of for reference. You want to see things. But if you want a lot of automation to run, many-to-manys are limited. Ontraport added a few months ago the ability to send emails based off an event to the contacts in a many-to-many relationship, but a lot of the automation, we're still very limited on what we can do with the many-to-many relationship. The other way you could approach it is a one-to-many. So we've got a one-to-many relationship here, and this we would have many contacts. So we could have many contacts at one event. So this is a great way to do it. It's simple. It lets you retain your history of contacts. It lets you. No, it doesn't. No, that's one of the problems with this. One of the cons to this setup is so opposite of what I just said. It does not let you retain your history of contacts in an event, because next time I have an event and then contact signs up for event B, it's going to overwrite that relationship. They can only be related to one event at a time. So you don't get the history. Up here in this setup, I would get the history, but I'm not going to get the automation. And in the one-to-many relationship, where I just have one event for my attendees, I'm not going to keep that history, but it allows me to run more automation, because now I can run automation based off of the events for the contacts. I can do more with it. So it's great. But I'm not keeping that history. And if I have more than one event running at a time where people are signing up for multiple events, it's going to overwrite each time they sign up for an event. So they would lose any automation that was running on them for event A if they came and signed up for event B a little later on. So that doesn't work so well. It's great if you're only doing a couple events a year, but if you were doing a bunch of events simultaneously, it's not going to work as well. So here is a bridge object, what I call a bridge object. And in this case, my bridge is tickets. And tickets are really the intersection of contacts and events. And in this way, I can have a one-to-many relationship between contacts and tickets, and a one-to-many relationship between events and tickets. And this way, I get kind of the best of both worlds. I can retain my history because my contacts will have a list of all the tickets they purchased in their record, and my events will have a list of all the tickets that were purchased for that event. But I can run all my automation because I keep all my automation available in a one-to-many relationship, so I can run all the automation I need to run. Now, this can get complicated. So I like to tell people, with every object comes complexity. And it's complexity in setup, and it's complexity in training for your people, it's complexity in everyday use. It just gets more complicated to use as you add objects. And again, if you're going to do things very manually, this might be great because you can just manually go in and do things. But if you're trying to run automation, yes, it's all available, but it gets more complex. So what do I mean by that? Well, one of the problems we have here is I can only put 2 objects on a form. So I have 3 objects here. So how do I get people to sign up for an event and automatically create a ticket to that event? Unless I want to send an email to all of my ticket holders for an event, I need to send the emails out of tickets. So 9 times out of 10, I'm doing all the automation and all the emails out of this ticket object, which sounds great, right? So, and what that allows me to do is that allows me to segment my ticket holders. So I could have VIP ticket holders, I could have speakers, I could have people who've only paid a deposit but not paid completely. So I could have all of these different things happening here in tickets. But if I were to, then I can send each of those groups an email based on whatever parameters in tickets, or maybe even in contacts, or maybe even in events. But if I were to send an email to the event, it would send to everybody that holds a ticket for that event. I can't segment like that. So 9 times out of 10, I'm sending out tickets. But the one piece of information we need usually is the date of the event. A lot of this correspondence is going to be based on the date of the event. And you can't trigger an automation in tickets based off a date in another related object. So in this case, events. So somehow I've got to get the date into tickets. So again, creates complexity. There's going to be more steps to setting this up and making it work. And anytime you're getting into really heavy automated custom objects, you almost always need the API. Now, Ontraport is supposed to be adding some sort of internal API. Landon keeps teasing me with it. I'm still waiting to see what that's going to be. And that might solve this problem. If that came along, then maybe we could get all this info we needed into the tickets object, and we would know we could create these relationships when somebody bought a ticket. But for right now, it takes a lot of effort to get all the information you need and get all these automations to run flawlessly when you start getting multiple objects going on. But all that said, for my clients, this is the majority of the time, this is the setup I'm doing, because it gives us more flexibility about being able to segment these ticket holders. You could even go a step further. I've got another example here, a step further, and that is you could break your speakers out into their own object, and they could have engagements and tickets. You could create multiple relationship. You could change this and just get rid of engagements and have multiple relationships here, so that your speakers lived in tickets, but they had their own relationship. So you could do things differently with speakers than you did with regular ticket holders, although you could do that probably with a drop-down field as well, which is what I'm usually doing. Usually doing a drop-down field. So that's really my 5-minute overview of a bridge object and why you would want to use one, but the cons of using a bridge object. Just know it's going to take more effort to set up. It's going to take more effort to maintain. It's just harder to use, but it gives you a lot more power than any of the other relationship setups. Now, pretty much taken all this straight out of my course on custom objects, the manual. So if you want to get heavy into Ontraport, we've got training on that, including some of these API tricks to make a relationship like this work, and how I get this info from here to here, how I create these dual relationships on one form, etc. So a lot of that stuff is in that course if you're interested. But there you go, my 5-minute overview of what is a bridge object and when you would want to use one. Hope that helps.